If you're struggling with infertility, and in particular unexplained infertility, then I want to tell you the story of one of my clients who'd been struggling with her own unexplained infertility for nearly 3.5 years. And during that time, she had suffered 4 failed IVF attempts, which were emotionally devastating. I want to show you how she became pregnant at the age of 42, just 4 months after starting my program. Now, towards the end of this video, I'm going to tell you a truth that's quite difficult to hear, but it's important that you hear it because it'll clarify things for you and it'll maybe even help you keep going if you feel like giving up. If you don't know me, I'm Brendan O'Brien. I'm the natural fertility consultant, and I'm also the author of Getting Pregnant When the Body Says No: How Women Can Overcome Infertility. I've been helping couples to start their families for the last 15 years. So I'm going to call this client Marie Claire. It's an anonymous name, but I just like that name, so I'm going to use it. Marie Claire's husband's semen test looked fine, and to his credit, he kept working hard to stay healthy. So Marie Claire herself had completed a whole range of tests, as you can imagine, over 4 IVFs. She'd done things like tubal patency, that was fine. She did an endometrial receptivity test, that was fine. She did lots of different hormone tests. She did all kinds of gene tests. She was tested for STDs and so on. Everything looked fine. On the surface, her case looked mysterious. But when we looked below the surface, it turned out to be relatively easy to fix. Now I say relatively easy. The thing is, this is true for about half of my clients. They're relatively easy. Not easy, relatively easy to fix. The other 50%, they've got more nuanced problems. There's complicated stuff going on and they need a kind of a different and more nuanced approach. Let's go back to Marie Claire. She had been using OPKs, ovulation prediction kits, in order to time intercourse every month. Now that's okay most of the time. People use it a lot, but there are times when you need a better picture of it. So I immediately encouraged her to start tracking her cycle, start measuring her basal body temperature every morning and charting it on a graph. Now this took a couple of months before we got some information, so I'm jumping ahead in the case here just to tell you what we found. One of the things it revealed was that her menstrual cycle was 40 days long. That's not exactly abnormal. It's long, but it's not abnormal. And it fluctuated by a couple of days here and there every month. So it wasn't exactly steady. We also learned another crucial piece of information, which is that her follicular phase, the first part of the cycle up to ovulation, was taking about 30 days or so, not the normal 14. We learned from the graph that she was ovulating every month, which is a good sign. Now her periods were quite heavy. That also tells you something. But although she was ovulating every month, she wasn't always having a period. There was some months where she'd miss a period. It's kind of tough when you miss a period because the first thing you're going to think is you're pregnant. So not only does it get your hopes up, only to have them dashed, unfortunately, but it also tells you something about what's going on in the body. That's the interesting part about it. So she's 3.5 years getting tested for all these things. And so far, nobody's flagged that there's an ovulation problem. Technically, she was ovulating fine, but to me, there were signs of ovulation problems. I also learned from the consultation that Marie Claire herself didn't sleep very well. She had broken sleep. She didn't get into deep sleep. So she used to nap during the day sometimes because she was tired. Now this tells me straight away that she's got a problem with her energy system. And if you've read my book, you'll know that I place the energy system and problems with the energy system at the very heart of fertility. In fact, at the very heart of infertility. The next thing was I analysed Marie Claire's diet. And this is the most important thing of all for me. Her diet was okay. In fact, it was kind of good compared to some bad diets. But that's not good enough for fertility. It didn't supply the breadth of micronutrients that you need to drive the fertility system. And you need even more than that to stock up for pregnancy. You need micronutrient reserves in your organs to prepare the body for pregnancy so that it doesn't run deficient, so that the baby doesn't suffer from an insufficiency of micronutrients, which has become the norm. As long as Marie Claire was to stay on this diet, she was never really going to fix the problem. That's the bottom line. You need to understand this crucially important point. If you're suffering from infertility, you need massive nutrition, massive amounts of micronutrients to activate the processes in the body that solve the problem. And then you need more on top of that to prepare for pregnancy. The 9 months of pregnancy create an enormous demand on mom's body. The baby really needs those nutrients. So somebody's going to run deficient if they're not stocked up and ready and being supplied every day. It's a big issue. Most babies today are born with an insufficiency of key micronutrients. This should be a crisis, but for some reason we're not paying much attention to it. If babies are born with micronutrient deficiencies, it means some part of their formation is impacted. This affects them for their entire lives in some way, and that may be the norm right now. That might be partly the reason why there's so much childhood illnesses and there's so much adult illnesses. Okay, let's get back to Marie Claire. The next thing I noticed on her blood tests was to do with iron. I saw low ferritin. It was 23 on her blood test. Now that's technically within range because the reference range is 13 to 150 and she was 23, just above the bottom of it. So it was marginal, but that's enough to concern me when it comes to fertility. And this was happening, believe it or not, even though Marie Claire herself was taking a prenatal supplement with iron in it. She still didn't have enough. I like to see that figure up at around 50, not 13. 13 is not going to cut the mustard. The next thing that concerned me was her thyroid result. Her TSH was 4.9, which is just over the top of the range. The range runs from about 0.4 up to 4. She was 4.9, just beyond it. For optimal fertility, we want TSH to be somewhere between 1 and 2, not 4. We know that this has a negative effect on egg quality because it has a negative effect on energy because thyroid is connected to energy. Okay, so why is thyroid hormone so intricately connected to egg quality? Well, the answer is because of how it regulates energy in the maturing egg. A lot of people don't know this, but it takes 13 cycles to mature an egg fully. It starts off as a small little primordial dot in the middle of the ovary. It gets recruited and it moves to the outside of the ovary where it's ready for ovulation. That takes about a year, about 13 cycles. And over that time, the egg is exquisitely sensitive to thyroid hormone because it's exquisitely sensitive to energy fluctuations. Any disruption, any struggle with thyroid hormone or energy production in the body generally, over that 13 cycles, and those eggs will not mature healthily. They'll have chromosomal problems, they'll have structural problems, they'll have surface problems where it'll make them harder to bond with the sperm. It's a big issue and hardly anybody talks about this. The next thing I noticed on her blood test was B12. Her B12 number was 251. Now the range is 200 to 900 and she was 251. So she was near the bottom of the range. Yes, it's in range. So doctors don't think it's a disease, they don't flag it as a problem. They say, you're fine anywhere in range, there's a big variation in people. But this is too low for fertility. You need it up at an optimal level for fertility. That's a crucial point. The next obvious issue was vitamin D. That was also within range, but on the low end. Now, why is this important? If it's in range, should it not be okay? The answer is no, because a lot of unexplained infertility is actually caused by an overactive immune system. And the key regulator of immune balance is vitamin D. So you want plenty of vitamin D, not just enough. In range is no good. It has to be in range in an optimal place in the range. That's what we aim for. That's what makes a difference. So in summary, her blood test showed B12, ferritin, and vitamin D were all in range, but on the low end. And TSH was above the range, but just barely. The doctors look at this and they think, it's not really a big problem. I look at it and I think, oh my God, it's a huge problem for fertility. Outside of blood tests, Marie Claire had a history of bloating, cramping, and even some constipation. Now this wasn't all the time, it was on and off, so it wasn't really regarded as a big problem, but to me it's telling you something serious about the digestive system, and the digestive system is key to the whole thing. So what do I do with her? Well, the first thing I did was the first thing I do with all my clients. I try and fix their diet. You're trying to accomplish 3 things with the diet. The first is you want to supply an abundance of micronutrients to drive the fertility system. The second is you want a little bit more than that to build up reserves in the organs so that the body is prepared for pregnancy. This is a crucial point that very few people get. And thirdly, you need to eliminate any food that's aggravating the digestive system in any way. That last point about eliminating the foods that aggravate the digestive system, that's the hardest part to get right. That's the bit that people struggle with. But if you're eating any food that aggravates your digestive system, it's going to cause inflammation in your body, and that propagates through the whole system, upsetting the fertility system. So how do you do this with your diet? Well, basically you start with a list of good food and bad food. You eliminate all the bad food and you focus only on the good food. And then from the list of good food, you eliminate whatever doesn't agree with your body. That takes a bit of figuring out, but that's what you have to do. And that means you're actually taking out some good foods because they don't agree with your body. They're nutritious, but they don't agree with you. They're not good for you. That's the difference. So I hope you don't get the wrong message from what I'm saying here. I'm not saying you need a good diet or a very good diet. That's not what I'm saying. That's a different thing. I'm saying you need an optimal diet that suits your body. That's the difference. And it's hard to get there unless you apply yourself to figure it out. So back to my client, Marie Claire. What did she do? She had to cut out some very nutritious foods, unfortunately, because they didn't agree with her. That included nuts, wheat, cheese, pasta, and tofu. They just didn't agree with her system. She also added in some other foods that she hadn't been eating, such as fish, butter, sauerkraut, and a weekly serving of lamb's liver, which is very nutrient dense. And she also increased her variety of vegetables. Doesn't sound that hard, does it? But she had to figure out which foods were aggravating her system and take them out. Some people find that very hard. The good news is that within a few weeks, Marie Claire noticed her digestion and elimination improving, so I knew we were on the right track. That's a good feedback for me. At that point, I added in some temporary bioactive substances as supplements, not nutrients, bioactives, which help the digestive system work more efficiently. After she added that in, she noticed an immediate improvement in her bowel elimination habits, and she started going to the toilet number 2s every day instead of every second day, and there was no problem going. There was no cramping. So that was a beautiful success story with digestion. Now, why is it important that you do a bowel motion every day? Nobody wants to talk about this, I know, but it's so important. We eliminate our hormones when they're used up through the bowel. If we're constipated or we're only going every second day or every third day, the hormones get reabsorbed back into the system and they dysregulate the system. There's too many hormones in the system. On top of that, we phased in a few targeted supplements and supplied some very specific cofactors that helped her body produce energy more efficiently. I gave her a lot of vitamin D and also some very specific forms of B vitamins, which help to activate the mitochondria and make energy. Remember, energy is the key to the whole thing. Or I should say, stable energy is the key to the whole thing. And then the good news. After about 4 months of working with me, Marie Claire found herself pregnant. That was nearly 4 years after she started trying herself. 4 months after she was on the program. A beautiful success story. I see cases like Marie Claire's all the time. On the surface, they seem extremely complicated because the medical system hasn't been able to make any breakthroughs. And maybe they've changed their diet, they've taken supplements, maybe they've done acupuncture, maybe they've done lots of good stuff and they've tried all this medication, Clomid, IVF, IUI, and it's like nothing's working. And it looks like, God, this must be a really complicated case. But I see them a lot. They're not that complicated when you look below the surface and you know what to look for. I want to divert for a moment and tell you something that's a hard truth. Most people don't want to hear this. It's kind of horrible to hear, I know that. The truth is, a significant percentage of women with infertility will never get pregnant. It's one of those harsh realities of life, and I really hate saying it, but it's true. Now I know there's a whole range of options that couples can choose from, maybe like surrogacy or even adoption. They're available and they're wonderful, but they're a whole different story. What I'm saying is, there's a significant percentage of women, and no matter what they try, they're not going to get pregnant naturally or with IVF. When it comes to the biology of infertility, nobody, not a natural therapist, not a doctor, not an IVF clinic, nobody can guarantee you pregnancy. It's just not possible. They can do their best, but they can't guarantee it. So how do you deal with this? This is the way I see it. I've come to realize over the years that all cases of infertility are complex, but some are just way more complex than others. I've kind of grouped them into 3 categories. Basically complex, extremely complex, and then impossible. The less complex ones are defined as such because they respond really well to a proper diet and lifestyle approach. That's what solves them. Whereas the more complex ones, they require deeper investigations, more testing, more protocols, more figuring out, more trial and error. It's harder work to get these women across the line. Now, the reason I know this is because in the 15 years I've been doing this work, I've noticed that about 50% of the women who work on my programs get pregnant having only implemented the foundational aspect of the diet and lifestyle. A further 25% will only succeed after doing some really detailed work, some deeper investigations, and solving some deeper underlying problems that are more complicated. And the last 15%, unfortunately, are the women who never succeed in getting pregnant. That is heartbreaking, but it's a reality. To deal with this in a better way, I ended up redesigning my program. I separated it into two parts. The first part I called Foundations of Fertility, and the second part I called Pathways to Pregnancy. Doing this not only made it more effective and easier to deliver and easier for people to do, but it also brought the cost down for a load of women to about 1/10 the cost of my original program. The reason for that is because about 50% of the women on my program succeeded after the foundation program, and they didn't need to go on to the more advanced program, meaning they didn't need to do one-to-one coaching, they didn't need to do deeper functional analysis of their body, they didn't need to test their immune system, their hormones, their mitochondria, they didn't need to do any of that deep dive stuff because they succeeded by implementing the basic tailored nutrition and lifestyle program. When I say tailored, I mean within the program, there's the means to tailor it, to tailor the diet to your specific needs. It guides you in how to do that. So the first program, Foundations of Fertility, that's now the starting point for all my clients. It's a program you can complete over 8 to 12 weeks, and it's designed to address exactly the kind of issues that Marie Claire had. So it's an 8 to 12 week program, but you're welcome to stay on it as long as you wish. You can continue implementing the advice from it as long as it takes. You can stay using the questions and answers, you can stay using the group support, you can stay on the program for as long as you want. You don't have to go on to the next program unless you really want to. If the time comes where you feel like you need to speed things up, or you think there's deeper problems that we're just not getting to the root of, then you can inquire about the Pathways to Pregnancy program. And if you think it's a good fit for you, you can apply to join it. And we start working on a one-to-one basis and get really stuck into the problems. So thank you for listening to all this. I hope it helps you understand my Foundations of Fertility program, where it came from and what it's designed to do, and that you realize that there's a follow-on path available to you if you need it. But remember, half the people who do this program succeed. If you have any questions, you can read the page that this video is on, or indeed you can email me. There's a link at the bottom and we can answer your questions about it. I hope this was useful to you, and I hope to see you on the other side. Thank you.